Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. For today I'm going to be putting together this 12 scale film projector kit from Bentley House Minis. If you would like to see how this kit is put together in more detail, I will leave the link in the description box for Ari's video where she builds this kit from start to finish. For anyone who has been thinking about possibly purchasing this kit, I can highly recommend it. This kit went together absolutely beautifully. She gives you everything which you need to put this kit together, and she even includes a little cotton pad for any possible ash transfers that could possibly happen when you're dealing with laser cut pieces. The kit does provide you with elements for you to decorate your miniature with, but for my version today I'm going to add some small bits and pieces to add a little bit more dimension and interest. If you are a regular viewer to my channel, then you will probably know that I'm currently taking a break from making YouTube videos whilst I enjoy my summertime and deal with things like my allotment, which is pretty much a full-time job in itself, and traveling and all of those fun things. So I will be returning to making videos more regularly soon, but for now all of those things are still happening. So I will get back to doing this more often. I do have a couple of videos in the pipeline which I've been able to do between some stuff as things are slowing down a little bit, but please bear with me and I will get back to making those videos very soon. I decided that I needed to move my what I think is a lens, and the reason for that is because I was adding the greeblies. I realised that the lens which should be with the kit isn't going to fit into that place, so I used some styrene rod to recreate that and put that on the front of the projector. I don't know if this projector would work the same with it being in that spot, but I needed to move things around to suit my new design. I keep this little box for random little pieces that I come across if they're from a project which I'm currently working on, or if I've designed something and I've cut it out of my laser cutter, then I chuck in all those little extra bits because you never know when you might need them. I also use some little extra dropout bits from the kit itself, and for my rivets I used some gemstones. I then used polyfiller to give myself a nice gradient between the two base pieces, and then I decided to use a modelling paste to cover the box joint and also to give me a bit of volume later on when I add my rust effects. To paint this, I first gave it a spray of a white paint. I then went with a turquoise colour, which was always my idea, but I did decide to change the aesthetic. So originally I was going to go for a chipped paint look. However, this time around I decided, no, I'm going to make this pretty knackered looking. At this stage I was really happy with how the miniature looked. If I wanted a minimum look, that would be awesome. However, I'm going to go really dramatic with my effects on this, and the reason for that is because if you follow along then you know that I am currently working on Professor Okeo's house. Well, something which I want to do for that house is build a basement, and inside that basement there is going to be a workshop. Professor Okeo is an adventurer, he collects all of these artifacts, but he's also going to be tinkering around with this. Now for the paint job, I added some black paint around the base just to make it look like some of the, or a lot of the paint had come away and it was showing the bare metal underneath. And then for the rust effect, I'm going heavy, really heavy. So I mixed together a kind of a rusty colour with some finely ground cinnamon powder, which gave me a lot of the dimension that I needed. I then brushed it all over the miniature where I thought that the rust would look cool, and then I then highlighted that a little bit more in certain areas just to really make that rusty colour pop. I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to have some sort of dials on my project, so I used AI to generate these images for me. For the hole punch which I used to cut this dial out, it was unfortunately a little bit too large, so it is a little bit crammed in there, but it doesn't really matter. Next I glued that into place with some PVA glue, and then to have a glass effect I used some UV resin. I did get a little bit distracted when I was adding this resin, so the cavity is unfortunately way overfilled. I really like the look of this volt measuring device, so I decided to give that a little bit more dimension and stick that to some of the leftover card. I then added some UV resin for the screen. I do wish that I was able to make it look broken, but unfortunately I don't know how to do that. For the lens, I painted that black and I did add some UV resin to that after. Next I painted the film reels black, followed by a silvery metal colour, and then to create a more cohesive look I used this rust effect wash from Vallejo. Now, as this is his little side project for him to be tinkering around on and restoring, we are going to need some tools. So I'm using these small charms which I purchased from Temu, and I'm adding some of that same rust effect. Next I'm using this small radio which I've had lying around for quite some time. I first of all primed it black, and then I'm doing a very simple paint job. This does not need to look perfect in any way, as this is in a pretty dirty, oily, grimy basement. And to add a little bit of life to the scene, I decided to 3D model a very simple mug to make it look as though at some point he has enjoyed a very nice cup of coffee. The kit does come with a plug, however Professor Okeo is based in England, so I had a look online at vintage plugs from the 1930s. I then 3D modelled and printed that out. I then stiffened my wire a little bit so that I could style it later on, and I added this small crimping bead for an extra bit of detail. At this point, all that is needed to do is glue my wire into the box. I could then glue my plug onto the opposite end, and then it was simply a case of styling the wire into something which I like. At this point, the main body of the projector is complete. For the films themselves, I first of all started with this light brown, but I didn't like that, so I swapped that out for a reddish brown colour. Now, these films are made of some sort of paper-backed acetate. I have tried to look for this product online, but I can't find it, so Aira, if you do see this, I would love to know what that product is. In Aira's video, she uses her hot glue gun to melt, well not to melt, but to heat up this plastic and make it look like it is flowing in a really cool sort of way, but my heat gun just isn't hot enough for that, and instead it was just getting glue all over it, so I just left it kind of straight. As my room for this project doesn't actually exist yet, I don't have a proper workbench, but I decided to use this table, which is one of the very first miniatures that I ever built, and it is a Heather Tracy from Thicket Works. It is a medieval table and I love this table. It's not the most ideal thing, but I decided it does need using, so you know, I decided I'm just going to use it for this. Off camera, I made a little rag using a dried out baby wipe, and the bottle, which is actually a whiskey bottle, I decided to paint that to make it look like it is holding some sort of lubricant. I decided to glue everything permanently into place on this one. I don't always glue my miniatures down. I do use museum wax quite often, just in case if I want to change my mind on something. But at the same time, I did want to get this table used up because I do fear it getting damaged. I'm quite surprised it hasn't got damaged over the years, to be honest, but I am glad to finally have used it. I could have, in hindsight, used it in my magic shop. I have just created a video which I'm currently in editing for, which it would have been a perfect table for that, but it's fine. I didn't want to make something new, so you know, we're just going to go with it. I then decided to add to the scene with a small box. This is one of the boxes which I purchased on Temu quite a while ago, and I found something lying around which is something else I'm working on. I'm actually currently designing a, what are they called, an hourglass. So this is one of the prototypes that I used for that, and I used that to create the coffee stains to make it look as though he has been enjoying that cup of coffee and just putting it down wherever, you know, a bit of spilling and all of those things. And that brings me to the end of the video. So as always, thank you for spending your time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I will be back to making videos more often, not too far away in the future. In the meantime, if you have enjoyed the video, please give me a little like, and if you aren't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you very soon. Bye.